shit!
I went fucking far.
That was a fucking sick launcher.
Oh no. Yeah! Holy.
Oh shit! You did this!
No, it's fine. Attention, Mr. Sukioka.
Oh wait, it's actually fine?
No, it's fine. That affected nothing.
Oh no, you interrupted the shit.
What?
What do I?
Oh God!
Yo!
No,
we got a match!
No, we got a real match.
We got a real match!
Wow, it's been fun, but G-Spot Week is finally coming to close today, and it's been one big green radioactive blur, wouldn't you say? We've discussed Godzilla backwards and forwards, shown the spotlight on some of his greatest enemies, and played a wide variety of games and systems, from the mighty NES all the way down to the lowly Dreamcast. When you think about it, it's never been a better time to be a fan of giant monsters. While Cloverfield broke new ground, it came out years and years ago, and while I had hoped it would reignite people's passion for kaiju, that sadly was not the case. Love it or hate it though, it was Pacific Rim that really was the jumping off point for mainstream audiences outside of Japan to latch onto this subgenre, and it certainly did contain that childlike wonder at watching hulking Goliaths duke it out with the fate of the world in the balance. Now, around the same time as Pacific Rim's release, it was being advertised that a new Godzilla movie was in production, and people realized that enough time had passed that the wounds from Ferris and Gino had healed, and very slowly the hype train began to pick up steam. But I felt like all the Godzilla merch you see in stores today is advertising the movie and not the movie advertising the merchandise. When I was a kid, there was very little mainstream knowledge of Godzilla, and it was only until the aforementioned 1998 film where Godzilla fever struck, and it struck hard. He was on toys, banks, buses, cartoons, you name it, the G-Unit was on it. It really seemed like the whole thing was just a big excuse to sell shit. But you can't expect anything better from the director that brought us such masterpieces as The Day After Tomorrow, 10,000 BC, and of course the hilarious comedy that was 2012. This time around, you get the sense that Godzilla 2014 just happened to come around at the right time. For example, IDW has had a Godzilla comic book series running for years now, and I just recently picked up a bunch of them. They reprinted a lot of that stuff for this year in anticipation of the new movie. There is also a small selection of kids' toys you can find pretty easily, and lots of figures and statues for collectors have just come out, but companies like Bandai and others have been releasing these Godzilla lines for a while now. Now, I have a pretty decent collection of Godzilla crap myself, with some cool small items donated by fans. To more extravagant purchases, I just couldn't deny myself. It's been going around pretty hard amongst people, but I think it's safe to say that I caught God's syphilis again fairly easily. Now, the reason why I mention all this, because just like in 1998, I was mad balls hyped for the new film, and my hype boner was indestructible until I actually watched the new movie 16 years ago. So like I said, on day one of Godzilla Week, I went into this new chapter of Godzilla's film career very cautiously, but after now seeing it twice, I can confidently say it did justice to the king of the monsters. Now, when you think about it, making a new Godzilla film for international audiences is a Herculean, no, fuck that. It's a monstrous task because you're dealing with a franchise that is 60 years old, has almost like 29 other films to be compared to, and the last time this was attempted, it was a huge fucking shit bomb. So you're working here with a margin of error that's about the size of Biolante's vagina here. I mean, a lot can go wrong. But the basic plot boils down to this. Strange occurrences are happening across the globe, from collapsed mines and the discovery of ancient fossils to where seemingly intentional and destructive earthquakes and nuclear power plants in Japan, resulting in catastrophic damage. All these events seem to be connected, and a clandestine organization called Monarch is trying to put all the pieces together. They've been around since the 50s because sightings of giant dorsal spikes cutting through the ocean's surface have the world's governments collectively shitting it. Okay, this is the first thing I love about the film, and it's a revelation that happens in the opening credits. They weave real-world events into the narrative, much like Metal Gear. The nuclear tests around the island chains of Bikini Atoll were not tests at all. They were trying to kill something in the ocean and figured nukes would be an appropriate way to start. Joe and Sandra Brody work at the nuclear power plant in Janjira, Japan, where their lives and the life of their young son Ford are changed forever after the plant seemingly has a breach and subsequent meltdown. Or does it? Yes, it does. Maybe! The film then picks up 15 years later, and Kick-Ass is now a G.I. Joe, and his father, Walter White, get mixed up in government conspiracies, cover-ups, and of course, giant kaiju attacks. That about does it for the plot, and while that's all fine and dandy, the real mystery is whether Godzilla is good or bad. Now, if you watch day 1 of Godzilla Week, I talked about how every so often they change up Godzilla's role a little bit. The majority of the time, he's a protector, albeit he is sometimes responsible for collateral damage, while other times he's just straight up an evil dick. If you've seen any merchandise and watched the latest trailers, you'll notice there's a whole other species of monsters called the Muto in the film. So with that piece of knowledge, you can draw your own conclusions. This is one of the things that elevates the movie far past the last American attempt. By putting another faction in the film, you make it more intriguing and complex than simply, oh shit, Godzilla, kill it, kill it, kill it, kill it, kill it! And that also makes it more in line with the majority of the Toho series as well. I think the overarching plot is well realized and thought out, and while I'm not a huge military fanboy, I'm sure that those that are got a great kick out of all the jargon tossed around and what seemed like, to me at least, a realistic portrayal of how the government would deal with giant irradiated beasts. What I wish there was more of in the film was Monarch, and specifically Ken Watanabe. He's a favorite actor of mine and really comes off as genuine in the film. I love the scenes where he's explaining what makes Godzilla tick, figuring out his motivations, and trying to understand him. He himself is a huge Godzilla mark. I wanted to know a bit more about him and his research, and maybe less about the military operations. Usually in Toho films, it's an even split between science nerds and military dudes, so it doesn't really bother me overall. I just kind of preferred one or the other this time around.
Let them fight.
As for the Brody family, I've seen people complain there's just too much human drama in the film. Well, welcome to the wonderful world of Godzilla, folks! Nice of you to have finally joined us. The vast majority of G movies always have huge portions of them devoted to the filthy creatures known as human beings. That's standard fare, and quite frankly, compared to many of the other films in the franchise, the Brody family is the least offensive out of all of them. Could there have been less of them? Sure, but I don't think it hurts the film or anything. It has to follow human characters. Because what's the alternative? You think Godzilla's gonna talk or something?
Something funny going on. You better check.
Oh. Visually, I love how dark, smoky, and apocalyptic the film is. After seeing the bright lights and neon hues of Pacific Rim, it was a smart choice to make this film feel and look different so it can establish its own sort of, visual identity. And I don't even need to talk about the special effects, do I? They were astounding. Everything looked amazing, had such great detail and weight to everything. I'd say it looked even more stunning than Pacific Rim. I wouldn't have even thought that was possible, but it managed to make its characters feel even bigger and more imposing, and that's no small feat. Now, one of the biggest points of contention coming out of the movie is the amount of monster fighting. Lots of people have complained that there simply isn't enough kaiju fisticuffs going on. Now, what do I think about all this? Good! Quite frankly, I'm sick and tired of summer blockbusters trying to fit so much shit on the screen with huge overindulgent fights that go on forever and you just start to feel bored by it, desensitized even. I love that the movie teased and when you finally got to the big brawl, it felt more impactful and more important. Would I have wanted more footage of monsters fighting? Sure, of course, that's a stupid question. But am I happier that they didn't overdo it? Yes, of course, what a stupid question. It takes real constraint not to just go overboard on those types of scenes. And when the three big moments happened during the final fight, the theater I was in was applauding each one. Do you remember that time when people next to you were clapping during any of the action scenes of Pirates of the Caribbean 4? I thought not! The best part about this decision is that since they didn't blow their load during the action scenes of Godzilla, they have lots of room to explore and expand upon it in a sequel. You know, if you really can't understand that, if you still have a problem with the lack of action, well, I'm really sorry to hear that. But don't worry, because, I'm sure Michael Bay has something more your speed, later this summer. So enjoy that. Something that makes me appreciate the film and how it was made even more is that I'm familiar with the director Gareth Edwards' only other film, Monsters, a tiny indie flick that cost a mere $500,000 to produce. It was another example of slowly drip-feeding you the lurking horror of large creatures just out of sight while focusing on just a few central characters. If you enjoyed Godzilla 2014 or other subtle sci-fi movies, I strongly suggest you check it out. He clearly is a kaiju fan, much unlike Roland Emmerich, who had never seen a Godzilla film in his life and still defends his movie to this day as misunderstood. Yeah? Misunderstand this!
The New York attack was Godzilla, right? That's what only American experts claim. But our guys here have doubts.
Since I'm just finishing this video, today, I was overjoyed to see Godzilla stomp his way to an astonishing $93 million in the US alone for just this weekend. For reference, Pacific Rim made only $101 million at the domestic box office in total during its entire theatrical run, although fortunately it made a cool $409 million worldwide. Clearly, people responded to the name of Godzilla and the love for the franchise, and that unrustles my jimmies very doucement. Where do we go from here? Like I said, there's lots of stuff that could be done with a sequel. The ending of the movie, while providing closure, of course leaves itself a bit open-ended as well. Early on, they hint that there are even more giant creatures living deep in the earth. And if you look closely in the first half of the film, you can see two little Easter eggs pertaining to... Not to mention that Guillermo del Toro himself said he would love to see a crossover between Godzilla and Pacific Rim, and that it would be too much for the human brain. So there's any number of ways they could handle it, but all of them are potentially awesome. So that about sums up my feels on Godzilla 2014. It's such a great jumping off point for the franchise. And with it being a huge success, I can't wait to see what the future holds. Will we see more American films? Will Toho get back into making kaiju movies again? Will we finally get a new Godzilla game? The possibilities are just endless. I really, really hope that if you're a kaiju fan that you enjoy the fuck out of Godzilla Week. And if you aren't a kaiju fan, I just hope you liked us playing a bunch of bullshit dumb games. Because I had a super fun making all 7 of these videos. And as you've seen, it's something I'm pretty passionate about. And yes, even though there's like 29 films and I don't always remember which mark of Mechagodzilla is which, or know the precise origin of every kaiju, but like, hey, no one is perfect. I just hope you had a good time, and if you've become a new Godzilla fan because of my Godzilla Week, then honestly, that's all I could ask for. Just thanks so much for being part of it. Alright, that's enough of that. We're gonna just go out in style. Take it away, big guy!